Hi, my name is George Bailey, and we're about to start a discussion about distribution technology trends. And we're glad to talk to you today, and we're going to have a great discussion about these topics. So let's look at our first slide, and it's all about how do you think about technology and how do you make change happen. So let's go to that first slide. So we have some great panelists today. I'm the Executive Director and Chief Research Officer for the Digital Supply Chain Institute. You'll hear more about that. And we're lucky enough to have together with us today Hafimi from Brunei. Hafimi, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thanks very much, George, and thank you also to the Foodeshow. It's a great honor to be with my fellow colleagues here today. My name is Hafimi Abdul Hadi. I am a member of the Legislative Council of Brunei. I am an entrepreneur myself, and I also sit on various regional panels looking at business focus and what do we actually do in terms of transforming how business is undergoing in our current pandemic situation and what will happen in the future as we take on the new normal.
Great, thank you. And Marco?
Hi, George. Thank you very much. A big thank you to Foodeshow and to Hafimi for joining us as well. My name is Marko Kovacic. I'm the Executive Director of Digital Supply Chain Institute for Membership and Engagement. So, our focus comes, to what George said, to digitalizing the supply chain and the future of it, and we'll talk more about it through the panel.
Thank you. That's great. So let's get to our content now. And all of you on the call today understand the importance of food in the world supply chain and the world network. And so we had three objectives we would set for this discussion. The first one is we want to review for you some of the huge changes that are just sweeping the food industry supply chain. And you know about this, but you're going to know more by the time we're done with this discussion. Second, we want to describe what it means to be resilient and how to make it happen. The word resilient is very, very important now, especially given what's happened with coronavirus COVID-19 and all the changes that is driving. Third, we want to discuss the special perspective of a country that's really making change happen. That's Brunei. We'll hear a lot more about that. It's an exciting, different story that will give you an example of what countries can do. And then we'll agree on next steps. We'll have a chance to have a discussion as we go through this. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the current supply chain environment. You can go ahead and flip ahead, and we'll get right into it. And Marco, I'll let you talk about the community that we have at the Digital Supply Chain Institute.
Thank you, George. So as George has given an introduction, a segue towards where we are going, we would like to share with all of you, what is the credibility for the things we are doing together. So the main credibility for Digital Supply Chain Institute comes from two main elements. Element number one is knowledge, and it's called the power of knowledge in the sense of all the research and applied research and tools which Digital Supply Chain Institute creates, and it creates it from real case, real-time business problems which are resolved or we work on. So we come to a second pillar, which is basically the community we are creating, which you can see on this slide, like the variety of the global companies, various different size of them. Why we are going, let's say, left and right with geography, size, and industry is because supply chain is a backbone of everything we do. So part of it, comes from like traditional businesses, but a big part of it comes as well for the future businesses. So we try to link the both, and we try as well to take the best practices from all around and to mix them in the new solutions which are directly business supplied. So back to you, George.
Thank you. All right. And by the way, we have a lot of members. This is just one example of some of the people we've been working with, but we have a bunch more as well. So we'll try to describe what other companies are doing that are not in the food industry but influence you. And the first conclusion that you should be aware of, and I think all of you probably know, is that the food supply chain is changing. And it's not just changing temporarily, it's really changing forever. Let's go to the next slide, and I'll explain some of the things that we see from the companies that we're working with. So traditionally, much of the food business has funneled through the restaurants, but globally, the whole restaurant businesses have been suffering quite a lot with the pandemic and the associated issues. And more of the business now is shifting to grocery stores, and the grocery stores have seen a remarkable increase in the amount of business that they're doing. Now, that's also true, but traditionally we've done a lot of grocery store shopping. People have gone to the store to buy groceries, to buy food. And now, increasingly, there's more home delivery, more contactless home delivery, more automated home delivery. In fact, in the US market, total grocery store sales are up something like 15% in revenue, but 40% growth rate for online. So a huge increase with online and home delivery. Remote agribusiness has always been a key part of the food industry, but now more and more local producers are becoming important for a lot of reasons, which you can well know, not only based on the freshness of the produce, but also based on people feeling more comfortable with this whole farm-to-table environment. In addition, the industry has always been about abundance and selection, and what we've seen during this crisis is that there are some shortages. There are some things that aren't available, and there are limited choices. So producers are deciding, you know what, instead of making all these, we're going to make just these. And by making just a fewer amount of things, we can make sure they're delivered on time and fresh. Experience and judgment has always been the way that we've made decisions in the industry. But increasingly, and I think inevitably, and if it's for a good thing, we're moving more and more towards algorithms, analytics, deep data to drive everything we do. And that's a good thing, and it's really, really picked up now. So many companies discovered during COVID-19 that they had to use Excel spreadsheets in order to decide what to do and where. Well, that's going to be changing quickly as people really ramp up their automated capabilities. In addition to that, data is important. We've always had store data, point of sale data, but increasingly it's customer data that will drive not only the work of the retailer and the wholesaler, but even the producer of food products. So a lot of major changes that are happening right now. Next slide, please. And we did a big survey recently, and we asked questions like this. We asked shoppers, do you prefer local produce and food products more than ever? I mean, in other words, is local important? And a large number of them, a third of them said, yes, not only that, but I'd pay more for local products. Or yes, I prefer it, but I won't pay more. But you know, if you look at is local better? 60% of the people, almost 2/3 of the people, are thinking local matters. That's an important thing to think about as we move forward and decide about how we run our supply chains. Next slide, please. And we also asked supply chain leaders, how has the demand for local food products changed? Well, a large amount say it's increased over 5%. Some think it's similar, but clearly there's a movement here as people are really looking at more demand, more volume of work from local products. Next slide, please. So what is the key topic here about supply chains? It's about being resilient and about food being resilient. Resilient means flexible, able to withstand whatever issue happens. It could be tariffs, it could be a pandemic, it could be a number of things, but to have a resilient supply chain for food is extremely important. What's going to make it resilient? Well, one thing is there'll be some new customer values that really drive how the supply chain is structured. For example, food safety is even more important now than ever. Always been important, but now big premium people are placing on that. Customers really care. Local production matters. We just went through that. There's an idea of a new food hub where people can collect local foods and bring them to the marketplace together. And premium items that carry a higher margin, a higher cost, have been increasing as restaurant visits decrease. So people are making more at home and they're willing to pay for some premium products. So new customers are thinking differently. And suppliers are rethinking what they make, SKUs. So we'll probably see, at least in the short term, less SKUs, less stock units. So essential items are always available. Now, the average product size is probably going to increase in order to permit less frequent store visits. So that's something really different than we've seen before. But people want larger things, so they have to go to the market less. And in fact, customers want home delivery. More customers want it than ever before. It continues to increase. And customers are actually, for the first time, really open to food products on a subscription model. In other words, tracking how much they use it and then having a subscription model that gives it to you when you need it. And this whole farm-to-table idea is still a growing trend, and we're going to see that increase. All of this is based on better data. True customer data really matters. And sometimes you have to trade for that data because the data you need, you may not have. You're going to have to trade for it in order to get it. That means somebody has it. You're going to offer them something and get that data back in return. Next slide, please. So Mark, I'm going to turn this over to you because you're our expert on collaboration.
Thank you, George. So as George has mentioned at the very beginning, all the circumstances and the parts of the food supply ecosystem are changing. As it was rightly mentioned, the customer is changing, the way of how they consume is changing, and the new circumstances, especially with COVID-19, are basically moving this forward. So suppliers, distributors, and retail partnerships will get stronger. And this is something what we have seen along the way. So it's not more about competing and, let's say, the know-how in the area where you are either supplier, distributor, retailer, or even producer, but it's about connecting the value chain together. Why? For instance, we have one of the big global companies who is our member and we work with. And for instance, they are now trying to adopt, their products to the new way of consumption. And that's changing the whole value chain backwards towards, the producing, distribution, warehousing and everything else. So what we have learned is that the collaboration will be the name of the game in order to have the food supply chain which will be, let's say, resilient towards the thing. Now, the new customer knowledge is the next thing which should be shared openly. That's something which George mentioned, correlated with data, is that there are so many various data points, not only about the customer per se, but as well about the products. So the customers are more engaged today. The customers are more knowledgeable. So along the food supply chain, they're the ones choosing it. And it's not only about the product you would like to buy, but it's about its origin. It's about the fair trade. It's about, how it has been delivered towards you. So the things which will be part of the different in the future for the retailers would be how they, go and understand the new customer, their needs and their values. So it won't be only about the price, especially with the new generation, but it will be about setting up all the standards, towards the values of the customer, and then understanding of their need and creating the products which are moving towards them. So then the next big thing we have learned is basically pricing should be flexible based on supply chain demand, but where everybody benefits. So what we mean by it, that it's a fluid process. It's not a process anymore where certain things are carved in stone, but they will change as everything changes within the economy with supply and demand, but as well, under quotes, with the fair trade, which new customer has visibility towards today. Because with their connectiveness and what they have seen, and especially with online shopping, you can see and you can compare. So you might be making a mistake once, but then twice, it can affect the brand. So the pricing should be flexible, and you should be following the trends towards the supply chain in that sense. The next thing was technology creates, as we mentioned, the true visibility. So being able to be transparent will be one of the core values of, let's say, the food supply chain, brand recognition on one side, and then as well the retailer brand awareness. Because if everybody can now collaborate and understand what the differences are, see the main touch points, see transparently of how the value chain has been going on, then the end user and basically the new customer would be having the visibility in the process, which was not so far the case. As internet is penetrating more, as mobile is going further into all geographies globally, as the food industry is moving, as George rightly said, more in out of store experience, the visibility will be a very, very important factor for those who would like to have brand loyalty and then, like the new customer commitment. So George, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. That was great. We are lucky enough today to have people from all over the world. So we have Europe. Marco's from Belgrade. We have the U.S. I'm in Jacksonville, Wyoming, and we have Asia Pacific. And we're going to have a great discussion now about a place called Brunei that many of you probably haven't been to, but it's just an absolutely fabulous place. So, Hafimi, I'll turn it over to you and let you give a description of the country and where you're positioned.
Okay, thanks very much, George. And again, I think Marco did a lot of summarization on putting where the context is in terms of where countries are headed in terms of preserving their supply chain. I think Brunei, because we're a small country and we also have very low population, the economies of scale in terms of trying to do mass production has never really been in our favor because we either don't have enough people or we don't have the right land mix. But at the same time, we're very dependent on a lot of imported food supply just to maintain our own food source for our population. And we negotiate a lot of these agreements bilaterally, government to government. We have a lot of secured contracts with other countries to make sure that the basic staples necessary for survival are always there. Brunei is positioned, I would say, geographically right in the middle of Southeast Asia. If you know the 10 countries of ASEAN, we are literally smack bang in the middle of ASEAN. We are an oil and gas country, and we've been very solely dependent on oil and gas as our main GDP provider. But at the same time, we understand the importance of making sure that we have diversity in the economy, as well as the ability to try and feed ourselves. So I think agriculture as a basic necessity for survival has always been there, but again, scale has never been to our advantage. But we actually find ourselves on the flip side. Because we have a lot of land that can be cultivated, very good land. We have a length of ocean. We have good freshwater oceans. Not fresh rivers, but we have access to a coastline that has got very good quality fishing grounds. So a lot of the investment that comes into Brunei is really into how do you grow food in a third country and actually use it to supply within your own country in a different location. If I can give a case in point, there is an investment by one of our neighbors whereby they've invested in fish farming in the sea. So it's open fish farm, it's open fish cages like they would do salmon in Norway or in the Pacific. And that would actually be grown in the ocean and basically processed and then shipped out. It can be both live capture as well as processed food. So I think the agriculture and the fact that we have to maintain good food security is something that Brunei has been investing over and in a very big way over the past couple of years now. And that adds to our economy away from oil and gas. That's not to say that oil and gas is not still a big player. I think it's still going to be the mainstay, but we do look at having more added value. We have the recent commissioning of one of the largest petrochem refineries. We have a new oil refinery capacity now in Brunei that can service all of our requirements in Brunei, so we don't even have to import. So if you look at it from a necessity point of view, with COVID happening, you were having restrictions in terms of tankers coming in, et cetera, et cetera. So now we have the ability to produce our own refined product in country, and even more so to actually use that as a GDP provider because we export some of the downstream products to other countries. Coronavirus has hit us in a way because of our small population. We came down very hard on ensuring that our borders maintain, the access into Brunei. And we've been very lucky, alhamdulillah. We're only at 144 cases out of a population of just under 450,000 people. So, we hope to keep it that way, even with the anticipation of second wave. I think that's something that Brunei is going to preserve. And countries are actually looking to us to actually say, look, how do we learn from that? And at the same time, find other ways to create piloting projects that they can then roll out into their own countries. I'll give you a case in point. We have an uptake of the contact tracing app in our population of almost 90% of the population. And that gives you enough scale, when you talk about data and analyzing the data, to have that company that's developed that in country, and to actually use that to demonstrate outside of Brunei. And now we're getting other countries asking that particular company to say, hey, can you come and look at some health solutions for us? So it's become a good testing bed ground, because of the fact that we have a sizable enough population that you can do a test bed of this type of data analytics, and at the same time keep developing more and more application type solutions that can be used by the general public. And at the same time, I think where do we sit in DSCI? I'm sure a lot of our viewers now are saying, what has that got to do with what DSCI is doing in the whole supply chain? I think Brunei, being a consumer, we understand the necessity of having good logistic process in country. So how do we use that to our advantage? We actually try to position ourselves now to actually say to bigger corporations to say, use this as a landing point, use this as a back end point to distribute within the region. We have we have direct access to all of the 10 Southeast Asian countries, and at the same time, we also have very good linkages with the bigger developed countries. Obviously, Japan, South Korea. We have India, and all of this is within a good 6 to 8 hour flight radius. So I think in terms of where we position ourselves is we want to be in a good way to be a middle location, I guess, for bigger companies where they can set up back ends, or they can set up immediate response type of product outflow to their customers within the region. So that's how we see ourselves, even though we're not a massive producer, and at the same time we want to be able to play that type of service oriented type opportunity to other companies to look at us in that light. We always, our benchmark obviously is Singapore in everything that we do. We thankfully have a little bit more land than Singapore and less people than Singapore. So there's good and bad in everything, but we hope that's something that will bring some attention as to the future opportunity of what Brunei is doing. I think the digital economy is something that has been taken to heart by His Majesty, as well as the leadership in the country. So this is something where we're propelling ourselves as a country to actually take that big leap forward in how everything is going to operate and function within the new normal. So I think that's what I can say for now, George. And look, I'll hand it back to you. And happy to take any comments later on.
Super, thank you. Yeah, that was a great discussion, and a great example of how a country can use the digital supply chain to make its overall life better. And I think that's exactly what Brunei is doing. Next slide, please. So we're getting to the point of what are the next steps? Where do we go from here? And I would just summarize it as follows, and I'll let Marco come in and say something as well. But here are the things that we think are really important. As you look at the food business, the most important thing is to understand the new customer, what the customer wants now. It's not what they wanted 5 years ago. It's not even what they wanted last year. There's a new sense of what is possible and needed in the food business, and make sure you know what that is for wherever you are in that supply chain. The second piece is you've got to go digital. We talked a lot about analytics, big data, about making decisions using algorithms. We've got to become very, very, very numbers-based, especially numbers that apply to what customers want. That's just absolutely critical, and the digital path is the way forward to do that, and we've seen that work over and over again. The third thing is the point that Marco made a bit earlier about collaboration. Collaboration is absolutely essential for success, but we think it's collaboration with a purpose. It's not just everybody gets together and shares things. There's always a business purpose so that people can win by doing so. We're not relying on goodwill, we're relying on good business to get things done, and that's what collaboration means in food. And of course, the final thing is, you should visit Brunei. It's a beautiful country with an amazing business potential, and maybe the next spot that could become a part of your supply chain. So next slide, please. We really want you to engage with us and talk a lot about where you're headed, and we want you to make sure that you have a chance to visit our website, the dscainstitute.org. Great stuff on there that could help you work through this. And I'm going to turn back to Marco for some closing remarks. Marco, anything you'd like to say to close up before we take Q&A?
Thank you very much, George. Thank you, Hafimi. I think, we packed a lot in 30 minutes, to try to be insightful. Since you have been closing with one very important thing, and that's collaboration. I think we are showing our collaboration with the Foodeshow, and we are really open to, share and expand and extend on what we learned, what we have created, and what we have developed as tools in this area. And, we keep it in that manner, and let's collaborate with purpose.
Great. Thank you, Marco. And we look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you.